This is what it's like going into session with my trade plan as a full-time $500,000 funded trader. We just finished up on GBP USD. We hit all full TPs today for a total of 3 to 11 risk to reward. 3 separate trades, the first one being 1 to 4, the second one being 1 to 3 risk to reward, and the third one being 1 to 4 risk to reward. Beautiful follow through of price delivery targeting the week highs with our expectational order flow and the trade plan that we discussed in this morning's stream with the private members that I host every single morning. In today's video here on YouTube, I'm going to be posting the stream so that you can see what it's like going into the markets in live time just before London session, marking up my trade plan, my analysis, and executing that trade plan with the members in the Discord. I highly recommend pay attention to the stream. If you want to become a consistent and profitable trader, you need to be able to have the attention span to acquire as much as knowledge and as much as education on the markets as possible. It's taken me 5 years in total to get to where I am today, to be able to pass these challenges and to be able to consistently generate prop firm payouts for myself and to ultimately catch moves like this. The most important thing that I want you to take away from today's video is not necessarily how to trade, but is learning the methodology of creating your own trade plan, going into session, executing that trade plan based on your plan instead of emotions, greed, revenge trading, trying to predict and think where the market's going to go, but instead of following your trade plan. And even above all else, if your trade plan fails, risk management always has your back. The 3 trades I took today will take me about 8 losses in a row to only now break even this account. And that is how important risk management is. And it's also super important to backtest and collect data on your system. So hopefully you'll learn tons today from today's streams. Like I said, if you want to get access to them, first link in the description of this video. So without further ado, we can start the stream. I'm going to post the pre-recording for you guys, and I'll see you guys at the end of the video. Hey guys, what's going on? So just a quick recap of what we discussed in the GBP stream this morning. I haven't started the stream yet. This is just me talking live right now. Well, pre-recorded live, and then the stream of this recording will be posted after this piece. But just to quickly recap these trades, and then the stream will go over what we saw this morning going into session. All right, so when we started the stream, we started at 8:30 GMT plus 2, so it was on this candle over here. And most recently we saw, using our 2-box methodology, this internal break of structure to the upside with a valid demand zone left behind. So this would be your demand fractal range and your refined demand candle. This demand zone to me was valid because it created the inefficient push with a fair value gap. It was unmitigated. It created the 2-box break of structure. It had a liquidity inducement just above it, which price swept to collect as fuel, mitigating the demand to continue targeting those internal weak highs. So originally I also took an entry over here. I took this entire demand range, took entry over here on this triple M entry confirmation, targeting this high for a 1 to 3 risk to reward, set BE at 1 to 2, came back to BE, and took entry again off the refined demand candle, which was this candle over here. A tiny little candle was your refined demand zone. As price mitigated our demand that created our 2-box break of structure, we printed a triple M entry confirmation. Now, a triple M entry confirmation is basically a triple break of structure to the upside, introducing bullish order flow to your point of interest and a good probability that price is going to run from your specific point of interest. That triple break of structure can either be on the 1, 5, or 15 second chart. In this case, there's been an indicator that has been developed specifically for this, which makes it much easier instead of having to hop over to the 5 second and the 1 second and the 15 second to identify this triple break of structure. So as soon as that triple break of structure prints, took entry confirmation with my stop loss and my TP at the high with a total of, it was 4.1 risk to reward, but a net profit of 4 risk to reward, including commissions and spread fees. Okay, so then after that, price again created that fractal 2-box break of structure to the upside, still indicating that demand is in control. Marked out my demand fractal range, again took triple M entry confirmation over here, with this wick being the triple break of structure to the upside, targeting a 3.5 risk to reward to the fractal high. I was preparing to take another entry over here on the refined candle in case price wanted to sweep this zone, but in that case price ran without us and we still caught this trade. Again later this morning at about 12:30, well now in the afternoon, price again created that internal and fractal break of structure 2-box to the upside, pulled back into our valid demand zone, which was this demand fractal range. On the 5-minute time frame, we printed that triple M entry confirmation, entered with my TP at the high. Stop loss was a bit bigger than that. It was a 1 to 4.1 risk to reward, 4 risk to reward net profit. Price just constantly delivering through, following through that demand chain, continuing to target those weak highs. All right, guys, so we're now going to dive into the stream. All right, guys, so we're now going to dive into that stream that we discussed this morning with the members. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the London morning stream. We'll go over our trade plan and markup. I'm also going to start including a bit of the two-box system going into session, marking that out and having a look at what we can expect using the 1 hour fractal structure and 5-minute zones with the idea of our weak highs and weak lows and our overall 3 structured types. Okay, so before we get started, just a quick mic check that you can see my screen and hear my mic clearly. I've also just started the recording, so that will be posted straight after the stream in the London webinars channel. All right, you're all ready to get started. We can get started with Euro USD, GBP USD, XAU, and our 3 major indices that we always cover, and any other pairs that you guys would like to request. All right, we can get started with EU. So Euro USD over the last couple of days has been reacting off the daily demand level at the daily strong low on the daily time frame, just following throughout that daily demand chain, continuing to target those daily weak highs. 4-hour time frame, pretty much very similar to the daily, with our most recent 4-hour strong low, our 4-hour demand level, which has not been mitigated yet. So there is a potential possibility that we can see the mitigation of the 4-hour demand and then continuing to look to target these weak highs in the real long-term perspective. M15 time frame, yesterday we shifted bullish with the M15 break of structure to the upside. So most recently we had the M15 strong high take out the previous week low, mitigate the daily demand level, and now has created that M15 break of structure to the upside, which has been created by extreme areas of demand down here. And we also have more recent demand areas over here, which is what price is currently reacting off at the moment. All right, so this can become our new M15 week high. So going into session today, the expectations is still to target these M15 week highs. We've also most recently had this fractal break of structure to the upside, which has now been created by demand areas over here. Okay, so going into session today, if price pulls back into these areas of demand, looking to go long to continue targeting those M15 week highs. If price fails areas of demand over here, we most likely will react off the refined demand range to this candle over here, as this does act as inducement for the refined demand candle. So if price sweeps this low, we most likely will get a confirmation of this demand level to continue long. If price fails all of these demands altogether, then we most likely will see a bit of a deeper pullback into the M15 swing range before shifting bullish, continuing to target those weak highs. Okay, you guys happy with EU expectations? If we have a look at two-box system, so I'm just using the HTF high time frame candles set to the 1 hour, so it marks out your 1 hour candles in the forms of these boxes, which acts as your 1 hour fractal structure, which has been discussed quite heavily in the hashtag 2box channel under the course section. Okay, so what I usually look for on the 2box system, I also use the MENTFX structure indicator. So if the MENTFX structure indicator has shifted bullish, as well as the 2box shifted bullish, the probability of going long is very good. Also in this case, because our M15 highs are weak, this was the most recent demand level that took out this previous 1 hour fractal high and also took out the recent MentFX block high. So this demand has a lot of institutional power with inefficient push. Potentially we can see a bit of that pullback, maybe some double bottom liquidity over here in the sweep into this demand to then look to go long. Okay, so that is the expectation of 2-box, but also keeping in mind the idea of the swing structure, just understanding where you are in the market and what expectational order flow would be. If I recap the 2-box system yesterday on Euro USD, let me just re-add the boxes over here. So most recently we also had, coming into session, the break of structure of this. Just before session, this 1 hour fractal high was broken to the upside, which put this demand in control of the session. Also understanding that price reacted off this demand level, which then price failed this demand. So if you were looking for longs on 2-box yesterday, this would have been a stop out, but then you also would have noticed price failed this demand and also created this 1 hour shift to the downside, which then gave a perfect opportunity for shorts to go short into deeper areas of demand. As price failed demand, supply to control, mitigation of supply to continue going short. Okay. You guys happy with EU going into session? We can move over to GBP USD. All right, all good with EU, and we can move over to GBP USD. Let's have to search it manually. For some unknown reason, this whole thing has been loading the whole morning, not showing up my watch list. But yeah. All right, so going into session today, GBP USD, the M15 highs are still strong. Yesterday, we just kind of created double top liquidity over here and over here. So there's the good opportunity today that price will want to take out this liquidity and also create that break of structure to the upside. But then again, we'll react on the lower time frame and what price is doing internally. Morning Jay, will today's markups be uploaded? Yes, so everything will be posted in the J Trades as well as the stream straight after. Okay, so going into session today, we most recently also had this fractal break of structure, internal break of structure to the upside, which was caused by extreme demand levels over here, which has the valid inducement right here. Price is currently just reacting off of this fair value gap, so this often becomes inducement for the demand zone. We've also had this fractal, let me just move the chart up a bit, this fractal break of structure to the upside caused by these demand areas over here. Okay, and we also currently have these valid supply ranges, which can be refined down to these areas of supply. So I'm going to update my M15 week low. This is still the M15 swing week low, which is also the internal 4-hour week low. So expectational order flow is still to target these week lows, but there's a good chance that price can take out this 4-hour, the M15 strong high, just to continue with more of a 4-hour internal pullback into deeper areas of supply before going short. So yeah, if price mitigates these areas of supply over here and gives confirmation, it would be valid to look for shorts to continue targeting these deeper areas of demand before potentially going long, or potentially if price reacts off the supply and fails these demands as a whole, then there's a good chance price will create opposite side supply completely in control, which will then be valid to target the M15 week low and the 4-hour week low. As we, in this scenario, we pretty much have liquidity on both sides. We have liquidity here as double tops and also liquidity over here, which has formed some kind of trend line. So most of the time, price usually likes to sweep both sides. So you'll find it will most likely sweep and then continue to sweep that bottom side. But yeah, again, just looking into session, reaction of the supply, potential shorts into the demand levels. If price reaches these demands without mitigating the supply, valid to look for longs into this area of supply, as demand is currently in control and has overtaken most recent supply zones. Okay, so if we have a look at two-box system going into session, most recently we've had this fractal break of structure to the upside, which was created by these demand ranges. So this can be your entire demand range from this fractal low to this fractal high, refined down to this candle. Okay, so again, indicating that going into session, demand is in control. So if price pulls back over here, valid to look for those longs. Do you ever give signals on trades you're about to take as well? Here at Funded, I'm not too focused on signals and basing the community on signals. I more prefer to live stream every single morning, going over trade plan and markup, showing you what it's like going into the session with a trade plan and following that through, rather than just relying on signals, but rather helping you educate you in your own journey to become your own independent trader. Okay. Okay, you guys happy with GBP USD? This was some two-box playouts on GU yesterday. So we had the demand zone that we actually marked out in yesterday's stream. So again, although two-box was bearish over here because we had this fractal break of structure to the downside, just look for a triple M entry confirmation on these refined demand zones, which was given on that candle, just running price towards the fractal high for a 1 to 4. Price then also created this fractal break of structure to the upside, took longs again on this new demand zone, which stopped out. Price then failed this demand, created this opposite side supply range. Let me just put this aside so you can see it. This was the entire opposite side supply range, which price mitigated and also gave that triple M confirm, just running a 1 to 3.8, well, was it 3.4 risk to reward running those shorts. Yeah, then again in the afternoon in US session, we had that big shift to the upside with the two-box fractal break of structure to the upside, putting this demand level and fractal range in control. So just took triple M entry confirmation from there, looking for a 1 to 4 risk to reward scalp trade on that two-box system, but also understanding the idea of structure and what price is doing. Okay. You guys happy with GBP USD? We can move on to XAU. Any questions on GU and EU before we move on to gold? Okay, awesome. So on those trades, you just targeted the internal weak strong. On these specific trades, I was actually just targeting for risk to reward, just for risk management purposes. So that's the nice thing about trading. You don't always have to target a specific point. You can also have your targets set to a specific risk to reward to stricten up your risk management criteria. So over here was just 0.5% risk per trade for a 2% return on each trade. So that's all I was looking for. I wasn't targeting specific points. I was just targeting a specific risk to reward. With this trade, 1 to 4 are also lined up with the fractal high that I was also targeting. So yeah, hopefully if that makes sense. Okay, we can move on to gold. This wasn't the one I was using. It was forex.com. Was it Pepperstone? Yeah, it was Pepperstone. Okay. Yeah, so XAU USD yesterday, just going to quickly turn off the 2-box and the main structure. We'll go over that now. XAU USD yesterday continued with a bit more of that M15 pullback, and then a big news move after the mitigation into the extreme demand to continue targeting that M15 week high. There was also a beautiful entry for 2-box system going early into London session off of the supply zone that was in control to continue short. So yeah, going into session today, we've had some awful pausing price action over here. So we can, in the meantime, mark this out as our new M15 break of structure, which has been created by the lowest point of after the pullback after the previous break of structure, which was this low point over here, because we had this break of structure, the pullback, which this was the lowest point that created the next break of structure to the upside. So this then becomes our M15 swing strong. In the interim, price hasn't really started that official pullback yet, but we can mark this out as our M15 week high. So the expectational order flow is still to continue targeting these M15 week highs. Okay, so most recently, we've also had demand levels over here, which has created this fractal break of structure to the upside. This would also be an equilibrium zone because the candles is bigger than the body, so therefore 50% mitigation is valid, and we're now busy creating this perfect triple bottom liquidity, so we could potentially see the sweep of this liquidity into the 50% to then continue long, targeting that M15 week high. If price fails this demand level, we'll most likely create an opposite side supply, and price will continue short, potentially into fair value gaps over here or even deeper down demand areas. I don't think price will reach all the way down here at these extreme demands today before continuing long. There's a good chance that price will either just respect this zone over here, continue long, or break this zone and react off weak zones or fair value gaps over here to continue long. XAUSD price action at the moment is just not very clean. I really don't like this kind of range. So also going into session, maybe just look for a bit of clearer structure to form before determining what's in control and targeting those relative weak highs. But yeah, as price stands, demand is currently in control. Our most recent demand with the perfect liquidity, valid for a trade plan to continue targeting those weak highs. Okay, if we have a look at 2-box system as well, most recently, yeah, again, going into session, this is very messy price action. If price starts the session, in the next 15 minutes, reacts with this demand, maybe takes out that fractal high, can look for that 1 hour pullback to then target that M15 week high. But yeah, price action at the moment on gold, just not as clean as EU and GU. But this would be my primary point of interest to look for longs to target that M15 week high. Okay, you guys happy with XAU? Is there any other 1 or 2 Forex pairs that you guys want to look at before we move on to USD and NASDAQ? GJ, okay, we can cover GJ. GBP JPY. I'm just going to use the 8-cap feed. Okay, yeah, so GJ I haven't had marked up yet. Just want to quickly turn the 2-box indicators off. Okay, so most recently on GBP JPY, we've had the 4-hour swing break of structure to the upside, created by our 4-hour swing strong low, which leaves behind our 4-hour swing week high. So long-term expectational order flow would still be to continue targeting these weak highs. Internally, we've had this internal break of structure to the downside, which leaves behind our 4-hour internal week low, and this also becomes our 4-hour internal strong high. On the 15-minute time frame, okay, let's just quickly mark out our 4-hour point of interest. 4-hour POIs, we have a valid supply wick zone over here with this big inefficient push, this trend line liquidity that's busy forming. So we could potentially see longer term a sweep of this liquidity into the supply to then also target these lows, the weak lows, and all of this liquidity over here. So price is busy forming this 4-hour trend line, which 9 times out of 10 you will see a sweep of both sides. So could potentially see a sweep of the top side, reaction of that supply to sweep the bottom side and target the internal weak low, catering for more of that 4-hour internal pullback. If price fails these areas of supply, we most likely will then just see price continue to target that 4-hour weak high, because the higher time frame intention is still to target these weak highs. Okay, but then again, everything is just a reaction of the POIs that you mark out, and also reacting on what the lower time frame is giving you. So most recently on the M15 time frame, we've had the swing structure wise, we've had a swing that wasn't a previous high because it didn't create break of structure. Take this M15 break of structure to the downside created by this M15 swing strong, which leaves behind our M15 weak low. Okay, valid supply areas that is currently in control that created this break of structure. We actually have an entire supply fractal range over here, which can also be refined to this candle right here. Okay, so if we get mitigation into the supply area, looking for that supply to demand takeover, valid to go for shorts to continue targeting these internal lows or lower demand areas. Because keep in mind, price at the moment is given the M15 break of structure to the downside, kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and there's a good possibility that price will want to continue targeting the 4-hour supply area before going short. So yeah, for me personally on the M15 time frame, these supply zones are currently in control, but yeah, we would need to look for confirmation before looking for shorts over here, instead of just looking for limit entries and risk entering over here, because there is the possibility, understanding the higher time frame, that price can take out this M15 swing strong, because this break of structure to the downside was also just a sweep of this entire trend line, giving the market fuel to continue longer. So that's how I'm seeing the market based liquidity wise, and also understanding the higher time frame intentions. But yeah, again, we set up our trade plan and we react from there. So if price give confirmation of these supplies, valid to go for shorts, targeting these demand areas and potentially even the M15 weak lows. Okay, most recently we've also had this M15 break of structure, or internal break to the upside, created by these areas of valid demand over here. So if price pulls back into this demand, we would need to see a little bit of M15 liquidity, as right now this is just a sharp push up. So if price sharply pulls back to this demand, there's a good chance that this demand will just fail and get swept. But if we see a clear liquidity buildup, we can expect that sweep with the confirmation to continue along into these areas of supply. So again, looking at the 2 box going into session, also most recently we've had this internal break of structure to the upside, fractal 1 hour break, which is the same demand zone that is currently in control going into session. So all the 2 box system really helps with going into session is understanding what is currently in control, which can help you a lot in formulating your trade plan going into session. So yeah, higher probability setup going into session, looking for longs if price doesn't mitigate the supply to continue into the supply area. If price mitigates the supply, valid to look for shorts to target these areas of demand. But keep in mind that there's also a good chance that price can continue to target the M15 strong high, continuing with more of that 4-hour internal pullback into deeper areas of 4-hour supply. Okay, you guys happy with GBP JPY? and the breakdown of price. Then we can cover Euro, AUD and USD CAD. All right, all good with GJ. Let's move on to Euro CAD. I'm just going to use the 8-cap feed, as most of us on our prop firms use 8-cap, so the pricing is exactly the same. Okay, so M15 time frame is going to quickly turn off the 2-box. Let's first have a look at the 4-hour. I haven't actually looked at Euro CAD for ages. Yeah, so most recently on Euro CAD, we have most recently had 4-hour swing structure-wise. I would take this 4-hour swing break of structure to the upside, created by the 4-hour strong low, which creates and leaves behind our 4-hour weak high. Okay, price most recently reacting off 4-hour demand level. So this would be your lowest demand fractal range, which can always be refined down to a lower time frame. So when I look at the demand fractal range, I just look at the fractal low to the fractal high at the lowest point that created the break of structure, the inefficient push, all of the liquidity, etc., which is what price currently mitigated. Price then created that 4-hour internal break of structure to the upside after the mitigation of the demand, and then the pullback into demand that took over control over here. So long-term expectation is still to continue targeting these 4-hour weak highs. Most recently as well, we have created the 4-hour internal break of structure to the upside, so that can be your IBOS, which leaves behind this 4-hour internal weak high, which has also created this lowest point after that pullback, which was the 4-hour internal strong. This becomes our 4-hour internal strong because we had this, that was a candle body closure, this break of structure. So we then created this pullback and the next break of structure. This was the lowest point after the pullback, the internal pullback, that created that next break of structure. And price just really continued bullish after that with no pullback until we had this pullback over here, which then leaves behind our confirmed internal weak high. Okay, so that's why this would be my current 4-hour internal structure. If we hop onto the M15, most recently we have had this M15 break of structure to the upside, created by this M15 strong low, and leaves behind our M15 weak high. So going into session today, our expectational order flow is still to target these M15 weak highs, also understanding that price has shifted bullish after price mitigated discounted areas of the overall 4-hour swing range, had that bullish shift, which signals price is now ready to target these internal 4-hour weak highs. Okay. So valid demand areas that we can look for longs to continue targeting these weak highs. Most recent extreme zones, we have an entire demand fractal range over here, which can be refined down to this candle. But there's a good chance, well, there's a lot of liquidity, trendline liquidity over here. So one of two things can happen in session today is if price can just sweep this liquidity, mitigate the demand to continue long, or just continue long from where it is at the moment to continue targeting those weak highs. Because also most recently we have had this fractal break of structure to the upside, which has been created by demand levels over here, which did have some M15 liquidity, which has just been swept. Okay, so if you want to refine this demand, you can as well, which would come to this candle over here, even potentially this wick zone. So that would be your refined M15 zone, and this would become your entire M15 non-refined zone. Okay. If we have a look at 2-box system for Euro CAD, okay, most recently going into session now. session has just started. We've had this fractal break of structure to the upside. So this is currently the demand level that is currently in control. Okay, so if we get potential mitigation into the 50%, because this is quite a large zone, and there's also all of this triple bottom LQ, potentially a sweep with entry confirmed to continue targeting those M15 week highs, or even potentially just the fractal highs over here for longs. Okay. You guys happy with Euro CAD and how we've marked that out and the expectational order flow? Can we move on to USD CAD? Any questions on Euro CAD before we move forward? Okay, we can move to USD CAD. Let's just disable this. All right. Just going to quickly neaten these Koki pens. Okay. So USD CAD yesterday, well, the last 3 days has been reacting off of a 4-hour refined supply zone at the 4-hour strong high, which is the reaction that we're currently getting over here. Okay, so on the M15 time frame, we've also now created yesterday created this internal break of structure to the downside. Okay. After price mitigated again, valid supply zones, we had a valid wick zone over here. And this also can become your entire supply fractal range, which is what price wanted to mitigate further into before it gave the triple M confirmation. Okay, because we had the mitigation into the 4-hour supply, price actually created that 15-minute fractal break of structure to the downside, putting these fractal supplies in control, which also swept all of this liquidity over here to the upside. Price created some sort of range. So again, this was an example where when price creates a range like this, it likes to sweep the downside and then also go and sweep the top side before continuing in its expected direction. So yeah, the reaction of the 4-hour supply has now created that M15 internal break of structure to the downside, putting all of these extreme supply zones in control. Right here, we have an extreme zone. Also, most recently, we have a recent supply fractal range over here, which created and flipped this demand level, which is also busy creating this liquidity over here and over here. So going into session today, we could potentially see a sweep of this liquidity mitigation into the supply to continue running with shorts into deeper areas of demand at the M15 swing strong. Also understanding that price is currently coming off a 4-hour supply zone at the 4-hour strong high. Okay, so most recently as well, we do have this fractal, or that can also be an internal breaker structure because that was a candle body closure which was created by supply areas over here. However, price hasn't created too much liquidity for this zone. It's kind of just pulled back into it. No real clear double top or triple top liquidity to sweep. So if price continues to range and create that liquidity, then there's good opportunity for price to sweep that, continue into the supply, to look for shorts, to continue targeting these fractal lows and potentially even the internal weak lows. Okay, so this becomes our M15 internal weak low. which leaves behind this M15 internal strong high. Okay, so yeah, expectation going to session is we want to see a bit more liquidity build up for the supply. We can then look for confirmations to continue targeting these M15 internal weak lows. If price pushes through the supply zone with no clear confirmation, price will then most likely want to mitigate deeper areas of supply before continuing short. Okay, if we have a look at two box going into session, yeah, most recently we've had this fractal break of structure to the downside, valid supply zone that's over here in control. So this is the supply zone that is currently in control. So again, yeah, every single supply or demand zone that you mark out needs to have your valid criteria, which is the inefficient push, the liquidity buildup, the break of structure. The only one zone, one criteria that's missing for me for this zone is just not enough liquidity yet. Price has mitigated the entry over here, but we can actually refine this to the 5 minute, which for me would come to potentially this candle over here, which is an equilibrium candle, which would be 50% valid mitigation. Okay, so we would need to see price sweep that liquidity into the zone and even maybe create more liquidity before going short over here. All right, you guys happy with USD CAD? Expectational order flow, and also overall learning a lot about three structure types, supply, demand, and the concepts that is taught in the core section. Any other questions before we move forward? Are you guys able to see the Discord chat on your side? Okay, awesome. All right, cool. We can move on to US30. There we go. Okay. Just to recap the 4-hour time frame with US30. All right, most recently we had, let me just turn off the 2-box. Most recently we've had the 4-hour strong low, break the previous week high, which then started that pullback, leaving behind our new updated week high. Prices most recently now just fulfilled discounted areas of the 4-hour swing range, so premium, equilibrium, discount. We've then had that M15 break of structure to the upside, which then potentially price is now ready to continue targeting those 4-hour week highs, continuing with the overall bullish order flow and expectation to target the swing week highs. Okay, so yesterday in session, going into London session, very good opportunity for shorts with the 2-box system. Okay, but we also marked out valid demand zones over here, and the expectation going into US30's London session yesterday was still to continue targeting those week highs, which is exactly what price did. We marked out this valid demand zone over here. We said if price reacts off this demand, we'll continue to target those weak highs. If price fails this demand, we'll most likely see a bit more of an M15 pullback before continuing to target those weak highs. Price did not want to continue more with the pullback. Instead, we reacted off our valid POI to continue targeting those weak highs. So going into session today, we can have this as our new marked up M15 break of structure, our new strong low hasn't really been created yet. This still actually stays as our M15 strong low. Yeah, this still actually stays as our M15 strong low. So this can be in the interim marked out as our M15 week high. Although price hasn't started that official pullback, In order for price to start that pullback, we want to see these internal lows go to the downside. Expectational order flow is still to continue targeting the weak highs. Okay, so most recently we have valid demand areas over here with the inefficient push. So over here is a valid inefficiency or fair value gap with this liquidity sitting over here. So if we get the mitigation into the 50% of this demand, looking for a clear supply to demand takeover, valid to go for longs to continue targeting that M15 week high. If price fails these demand levels, valid to then look for shorts to continue riding more of that M15 pullback into deeper areas of more extreme demand. We have a valid demand here and also over here before continuing longs to target that M15 week high. Okay. Potential 2-box setup going into session as well. We have most recently had this fractal break of structure to the downside. So let's have a look at the 5-minute time frame. Yeah, so we've had this fractal break of structure to the downside. This is the supply zone that caused that, which would also be valid at the 50%. So this is an example of where it's important to understand your structure types and your overall direction in the market, is because looking for shorts over here, not as high probability because price is about to react off a higher time frame demand level. So if you get the wicking of this demand and you're still looking for shorts over here, there's a good opportunity that this supply can fail. Also understanding that your M15 highs are weak. So in a scenario like this is a valid 2-box setup, but it would be more higher probability to look for that 1-hour fractal shift to the upside and look for that demand level that's in control to then rather go long to target those weak highs. Okay, so that's why it's super important when you going through the 2-box content also to have the overall understanding of your 3 structure types. So yeah, 5-minute time frame, most recent supply zone that's in control. Okay, I don't really see anything further up above, but simply because price is about to react off a demand level, I would not be looking for shorts off of here going into session, but instead looking for that long bias to target the M15 week highs. Okay, so do you guys understand this example of the 2-box and understanding that alongside with your 3 structure types? Okay, is there any other 1 or 2 pairs that you guys want to look at? Then I think we've covered enough pairs for the stream. We've done our major pairs that we look at and some nice additional pairs as well. Yeah, I've noticed TradingView has just been doing this the whole day. UJ, if it's okay, yeah, we can have a look at USD JPY. Let's just come back to the 4-hour. Okay, yeah, so on UJ, we now have targeted that 4-hour week high. So we actually created this. The official break of structure was over here yesterday with this candle body closure. Okay, so we can then update our swing structure. Although for me, this is more of an internal break instead of the 4-hour swing. Simply because to mark this now as the 4-hour swing strong low, this isn't really a 4-hour swing strong low. This is just more of a internal or 4-hour fractal low, because swing structure needs to look, you know, very, very clear on the chart. This for me is just fractal structure. So this was almost more of just a pause in price action before continuing to target that 4-hour week high instead of a proper pullback into the discounted areas of pricing. Can we consider this not a boss rather than we just move the week up? Yeah, so in my case, what I would do over here, for me, this would just be a 4-hour internal break of structure to the upside. So that would be your IBOS. Okay, this M15 swing strong also becomes your 4-hour internal strong. Okay, but our M15 structure is also most likely updated. We'll check that now on the M15 time frame. Yeah, making this your 4-hour internal week high. And also our 4-hour swing week high. Okay, so this would be the internal week and the 4-hour swing. I'm not happy with marking this as our swing structure, as this was just more, like I said, a pause in price action before price went to target those week highs. So yeah, M15 time frame. Most recently now, we've had that M15 break of structure to the upside. That M15 pullback only really started over here with this internal break of structure to the upside. These over here wasn't really just pullbacks, that was more just pauses in price action and fractal structure occurring. So the M15 swing strong can still remain the same over here. We'll just leave that as is the internal strong, and this also becomes our M15 swing week high. So 90% of the time, your 4-hour internal structure also lines up with your M15 swing structure. Okay, so going into session today, we actually currently reacting of older demand levels that also swept this liquidity. This was an extreme wick zone that we marked out, I think, a few streams back that created this M15 break of structure, but this was also perfect double bottom liquidity, so there was a good reason for price to just sweep the zone, then give that confirmation to continue long. So most recently in session, supply that is in control, we have extreme supply areas over here that created this internal break of structure to the downside here. Oh, come on. So I'll quickly remove this Koki pen. So this was the most recent supply that took out this most recent M15 internal strong low. So we then had that M15 internal shift signaling that we've now started that M15 swing pullback. And most recently in session at the moment, we've had these fractal demand levels, which is currently in control. So we have a valid demand level over here that took out this fractal high. Okay, so if we get a pullback into this area of demand, we do want to see a bit of a liquidity buildup, as there's been no liquidity built up for the zone for the tap into this demand level to potentially then continue long into deeper areas of supply and even potentially target the overall week high. Okay, so if we had to have a look at 2-box, you can immediately see that demand is currently in control. Okay, so we've had this fractal 1-hour break of structure to the upside, which the same demand zone over here is currently in control. So again, before we look for longs in this demand, valid to wait for that liquidity buildup to then have that sweep to then go long and target these fractal highs and potentially even the deeper area supply zones at the M15 week high. Okay, so you're happy with UJ? Overall understanding is price expectation is still to target the M15 and 4-hour internal week high. You happy with UJ? Similar and lined up to what you have? Okay, awesome stuff. Okay, yeah, then I think we've covered enough pairs for the stream. So I'm going to quickly post all of the screenshots of the charts in the trade room, as well as upload the stream to YouTube straight after so that I can process in HD. And then I'll post that link immediately in the London webinar section. Okay. I hope you guys are continuing to get tons of value from the streams. You must always just type in chat or in the streams if there's anything else that you want me to include, specific strategies, setups that you guys perhaps have, can recap them for you. So yeah, That's what the streams are for, is for you to ask as many questions as possible.